Hello, welcome to Appalachian Saw and Repair on YouTube, where we don't do cheesy intros. What we do is test things. So today, I have set before us some chains and a saw. So what we're doing is testing different kinds of filing that you can do, and I'm doing that because really when it comes to filing, I'm average. Like, I'm proficient, but I wouldn't ever pretend to sell anybody a square chain that I filed, right? Unless some local guys, anyway. So I also happen to get a 3-pack of Dukes chain because it's a great price and it looks like good chain. And I have found out that it's pretty good chain. I like it. I like Archer stuff too. I mean, but you know, for your average firewood guy, I mean, come on, $30 for 3 20-inch chains, and it's full chisel, none of that goofy anti-kickback nonsense. So here's the premise of the test, right? I had 3 loops of bone stock Dukes chain. I have more than one, but I've got a fresh loop of stock C83 that I've not touched. And I wanted to compare a couple of different filing methods. So we took one loop of stock Dukes, didn't touch it. I checked raker height, and rakers were right in the neighborhood of 25 thousandths, so I left them alone. So, I mean, it's kind of a typical looking round profile. It's not exactly round. It's a little bit more hooked up top with a, you know, so it's good stuff. Out of the box, it ran perfectly fine. I have heard another guy say that the stuff he got out of the box, the rakers were so high, he's not sure how it cut. So out of the box, which is what a lot of guys will run, if you're halfway decent with a round file, you can beat it. I'll just be honest with you there. But I wanted to compare it as it is. I also took another loop of the Dukes, and I applied to it. This would be the 3rd or 4th chain I've converted to hexa. I'm too cheap to buy steel chains at a retailer. Zoom in here so you can get a look at the part number if you want, or any particular details. I've got another video up that sort of goes into more detail on how this works and how I did it, if you care about that sort of thing. This file's like round ground. So if you can push a round file, you can use this. And I'll go ahead and spill the beans and tell you, this is worth it. In my experience so far, I've cut some timber on hexa chain, some pithy firewood stuff, some cookies, obviously here in the yard. It's good stuff. It holds an edge. I will say, if you're mindful of your raker height, as you should be, you're going to have to learn smaller numbers. As you'll see here in a second, all these chains were set raker height at 25 thousandths, just to keep it, just to eliminate variables as much as possible. This dogged the hardest. It stalled the hardest when I dogged in. But you can see it's a radically different profile in the cutter. But it's not like trying to do square chain where you have to learn an entirely new technique and figure out how it works, right? Much easier to pick up, and it's good. I like it. I highly recommend it. To be honest, I think it kind of makes conventional round look silly. Pointless even. If you can, the only other variable to doing hexa as opposed to round is that you have to maintain the rotation of the file as you go. You can't twist. I've seen some guys, I think Buckin teaches that, twist the file as you go, friends, whatever. You have to keep your file flat, because if you twist or rock the file as you're pushing it through the tooth, you're going to wind up with not hexa. You're going to wind up with some weird chattery looking nonsense. I like it, and it did very well on this Dukes chain. It filed up very nicely. I was very happy with it. The 3rd we tested, part of the reason I wanted to do this test was I had just got these steel triangular chisel bit files. They are triangular. So each apex of the triangle has a flat spot that has teeth, so it cuts. But this is more conventional square, we'll say. This is the first one of these I've done with that file. The chain did file up nicely, so if you look at it there, you will see the angles are good. I've only square filed and converted a half dozen square chains, so it's not like it's something that I have done a whole lot of. And that becomes evident when you start to see times in these videos. That it was actually slower than the stock Dukes. So take that for what it is. I have compared my square filing with a double bevel goofy velour bay or what have you, and it's comparable to C83 or faster. It's comparable to it. It depends on the wood and some other variables and crap like that. But this square with the triangular chisel bit was a lot easier to pick up. And if you want to learn to file square, I commend it to you. Because that's one of those skills that, yes, there's a learning curve to it. But if you get good at it, it pays off. In my experience, I don't know that square dulls necessarily a whole lot faster if you're mindful of your cutting. But if you're one of those guys that constantly has your chain in the dirt, just pay someone else to file your chains and pay them generously, because there's no reason for that. And then the fourth video that you'll see, or the fourth run, you'll see it's bone stock C83. That's what's on the saw. We ran them all on this bone stock, not even muffler modded 500i, because that's one of like 2 saws I have that is stock in the shop. Stock saws are boring. You'll see that. But 20-inch, 3/8, 50 gauge, 72 drive length, full chisel, no anti-kickback or whatever. All the chains were ran at 25 thousandths for raker height. The reason I did that is because, well, frankly, actually, I haven't measured the raker height on the C83. I left it alone because I left the stock Dukes alone. But the hexa, all 3 of the Dukes loops were 25 thousandths raker height. So, with that being said, let me show you what they did, and then we'll talk about why I think which one was faster. All of them are ran in the exact same hard maple log. I put basically no down pressure on any of the first 3 cuts. The 4th cut, I dogged in and rolled through it to show sort of how the chains react to a little bit more load. So, here you go. So what have we learned? We learned that hexa is really fast, and you don't have to be that good to make it fast. It was faster than stock Dukes. It was definitely faster than my Square, and it was faster than C83, which is really the surprise. I was really just hoping to be comparable to C83, but it was faster. So let me grab my sheet here. We'll show you some times. Hold on. So I did go through frame by frame to time all of these. That's where I got the numbers from. The Dukes was the second slowest with an average of 6.31. The Square filing was the slowest at 6.66. Honestly, I think the Dukes could have been quite a bit faster with more pressure compared to the stock Dukes. But, again, we're trying to compare cutter profiles. C83 was the second fastest at 5.73 average, and then the hexa was the fastest at 5.45. Those averages don't include the dogged in runs, largely because I wasn't trying to do those for speed. I was trying to do those to show how that cutting profile reacts to more pressure, right? So again, really all I'm trying to do in this is to illustrate and to show the difference in cutting profiles on a cutter and what you might be able to expect if you're halfway decent, right? Like I said, I've only converted and square filed about 6 chains. I know I can get a whole lot better at it, but I like to think that I'm moderately okay at it. Apparently this proves me wrong, but in any case, if you start filing square and you're learning, watch some YouTube videos, practice it, make sure your angles are in the right spot, your lines are in the right spot, you can do it too. So, but that hexa, man, I know this video is starting to turn into a promotional bit for Dukes and steel hexaphiles. It's neither. I paid for both of those things. I paid for the chains, I paid for the files. But I want people that watch this to be able to know that, hey, you're not just relegated to buying new loops of C83 every time you want to cut faster. Right? Because I know C83 is very, very complicated and difficult to replicate. I know there's a lot of guys saying they're doing it with this, that, and the other. But I don't think anybody wants to sit down and spend an hour with the file guide and multiple file sizes chasing down that profile when you can buy a regular old hexa file that, if you know how to round file, you know how to use this and beat it. Now, the great caveat to all things is that there's always variables. In certain species, is C83 going to be faster? Maybe. I mean, in today's example, the hexa was about 1/3 of a second faster, right? So different species, different chain, different RPM, different raker heights, all of a sudden all that can change. But we can say, I think relatively confidently, that hexa can be on par with C83. And everybody that I've ever talked to that files race chains likes to benchmark against C83. Well, let's say it's 5% or 30% or 20%. And they're testing in their wood on their day with their saw. And obviously those percentages are liable to change depending on all of these conditions. But if C83 is the great benchmark, which I think we might say that it is, because it's, you know, reliable and consistent, then we might say that based on those cuts that hexa filing is pretty dang quick. It's pretty good. I've got a handful of chains that I have put quite a few hours on at this point, and they all still look good. They're still sharp. They still run great. So I guess that's my conclusion, if I were to have a conclusion, is that you don't have to be, you know, part robot Symington to produce good working chains. Right? I won't say a fast chain, but a good working chain. And I think you ought to try that. I also think you ought to pick up some Dukes chain, because it's a good price. I mean, shoot, it was faster than me square filing it. So, with all that being said, take it easy.